Which school you went to, but the tax cuts you're planning. Ministers insisted today after the Conservative leader David Cameron branded attacks on his privileged background as spiteful. Last week, Gordon Brown said the Tory inheritance tax plans appeared to have been dreamt up on the playing fields of Eton. Today, Mr Cameron insisted he wasn't embarrassed in the slightest about his schooling and said class war tactics would not work. Andy Davis reports.
For any of those Afghans nearby who bothered to listen, this must have been utterly mystifying. For here, above the battlefields of Afghanistan, stood a possible future British Prime Minister, clearly worked up over a remark concerning his old school's sports pitches, those legendary playing fields of Eton.
If Gordon Brown and Mandelson and the rest, if they want to fight a class war, fine, go for it. It doesn't work. It's a petty, spiteful, stupid thing to do. But if that's what they want to do, you know, go ahead.
This was the comment 4 days ago which ignited the row.
Now, the issue for the country, is it public services for the many or inheritance tax cuts for the few? I have to say that with him and Mr Goldsmith, their inheritance tax policy seems to have been dreamed up on the playing fields of Eton.
Political graduates of these fabled Etonian fields have in the past been frequent targets of Westminster's class warriors, and Gordon Brown's neat little reference to them went down a storm within Old Labour. One sketchwriter commented, the Prime Minister had found his voice again. And the theme of a privileged few was adopted again today by one of his ministers.
You do agree that it is stupid and petty to raise people's background where they went to school?
No, that's what we're doing. What we're talking about is that, you know, in the end, some people do have very privileged backgrounds and that makes them very lucky. A lot of us have different kinds of advantages or luck in our backgrounds, but the key thing is, do you then start arguing to protect privileges for a small number of people for the future, or do you try and help everybody get those sorts of advantages for the future? And that, in the end, is the difference between us.
The Shadow Business Secretary, Ken Clarke, today wrote of base political mudslinging from Labour, a major strategic blunder, he said, pointing to Labour's failed Tory toff tactics at last year's Crewe and Nantwich by-election. But there is a sensitivity within the Shadow Cabinet on this matter. Search for Eton on David Cameron's Conservative website biography, or the independent school St Paul's on George Osborne's, and there's no mention of which school they went to. Click onto William Hague's biography, however, and his comprehensive school gets a clear reference. So too the grammar school on the party chairman Eric Pickle's website.
I'm Boris Johnson. Dave. Short for David, presumably. Yeah, could be.
As the Labour strategists follow the documentary makers in highlighting the educational backgrounds of senior Tories, one poll of 2,000 voters published today suggested the tactic may be gaining some political traction. Over half polled said yes to the question, are the Tories still the party of the rich?
No evidence yet that the attacks on David Cameron are winning new voters for Labour. But there is evidence from our poll in today's Sunday Times that David Cameron's rating is down on last month, that people do think the Tories are the party of the rich, that many people think that David Cameron is out of touch because of his roots. So it's working at the prior to voting stage. To some extent, some people's attitudes to David Cameron are changing. It's not yet clear how and whether and to what extent that will translate into votes.
If the class war tactic is being employed, then Labour will have to remember the failure of their toff-bashing tactics at Crewe and Nantwich. But for many in Old Labour, the word Eton represents something unique, a battle cry of old, which still has the power to mobilise more than a few of the party faithful.
Well, earlier, the Conservative Shadow Health Secretary, Andrew Lansley, joined me in the studio, and I asked him if he or his colleagues are embarrassed about what school they went to.
No, I'm not. From my point of view, for example, I went to Brentwood School. I went on the local authority place on the direct grant scheme, which actually, as it happens, is the same school as Jack Straw and one other Labour MP went to. And as Ken Clarke said today, he said, look, Harriet Harman, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, went to St Paul's Girls' School. George Osborne, Shadow Chancellor, went to St Paul's Boys' School.
George Osborne doesn't mention it on the Conservative Party website, nor does David Cameron, nor does Oliver Letwin. You know, whenever you've got somebody who went to a comprehensive school, it's in the first line of their bio. William Hague went to comprehensive school.
Well, the school I went to wasn't a comprehensive school, but it's on the website. That's not the issue. The issue is not.
Suggests a bit of embarrassment
where people
went
to school. No, the issue is not where people went to school. The issue is where people are going. Is what they're capable of. What are people's values? What are they going to achieve for the country? That's really the issue.
But isn't the issue whether you understand
But think about it. A tired Labour government, at the end of 13 years, they've gone back to the kind of arguments that Labour were deploying in the 1970s and 1980s.
But if you
what happened to the New Labour project? It seems to have been completely destroyed.
If you were born into privilege, you went to a privileged school, you lived rich, and you're still rich now, what do you really understand about how ordinary people live?
Well, we've got Conservatives who come from every walk of life. We've got Conservatives who come from every part of the country.
You know, look at the people at the top of your party.
As Ken
Clarke
said,
really understand
there he is.
About
Ken Clarke,
people?
part of the shadow cabinet. He went to Nottingham High School. He went on a local authority place. Ed Balls went to Nottingham High School. He went as a fee-paying place. So, you know, is that the issue? I went to a school locally on the basis not that my parents paid, but that I went as the local authority place. But I don't think, you know, and I've worked with David Cameron, I worked with him best part of 20 years ago. I know that he is where he is, not as a consequence of his background or...
Really?
Yes.
Oh, come on.
Because I was responsible... I mean,
you don't think his Eton education and his Oxford education had anything to do with where he is now?
Because I worked with him 20 years ago, and I know in that job... it was not a question of his having got that job because of where he came from. It was him having that job because of his abilities, and that has been true all the way through. He is a man of remarkable ability, and actually what he's demonstrated as leader of the opposition is he not only has all the talent and the intellect for this job, actually he has the commitment and the strategy to turn this country into one that we can be proud of, with a built economy, a restored economy, a stronger society, and rebuilding trust in politics.
But in the current climate, isn't the inheritance tax issue just a painful one? You know, it's fine when the country's feeling
You mean for the government, because
right
they've been
now,
reducing, they've been following our lead in terms of this.
No, but when Gordon Brown says the trouble is all the people who are going to benefit from this are the people on your Christmas card list, that has some bite, doesn't it? Because it's probably true.
It has no bite at all, because actually out there are 2 million people who have homes worth more than £325,000. You know, there is a very widespread sense in this country that inheritance tax is an unfair tax because people are living in homes, and it is essentially about people's homes, the value of which have accumulated over recent decades, which have nothing to do with whether people are rich or whether they've inherited it. It's all to do with money tied up in their homes. So it's unfair simply to tax all that away from them.
It's about £2 million houses. And, you know, you go to George Osborne's very grand place in Notting Hill, I don't think he affords that on an MP's salary. You know, that's a multi-million-pound place, and, you know, that says something about where he's from.
Your point is that people in my view, who have clearly the abilities and the vision and the commitment to this country should somehow be barred because of where they came from? This is nonsense. Surely we live in a better world than that. We live in a world where people should just be thinking about what they can achieve, what their values are, what their vision is, what their commitment is, and what they're able to secure by way of progress in this country, not where they've come from, not whether their parents or their family happen to have money.
Andrew Lansley from the Conservative Shadow Cabinet.